right. Well, Leland, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming to the 15th Concordia Annual Summit.
Thank you, Matt. For those of you who don't know, Matt and I first met in 2008 at the Republican National Convention, and we are now here together.
That's right. I'll go even more into the story for a second. Because
Please.
No, because it was first at the Democratic National Convention, because I was working for Fox News, and we were in Denver, Colorado, and I watched you in awe as you did whatever it took to get a question to Bill Clinton as he was walking down the hallway. And then I saw you again in Minneapolis at the Republican Convention.
There may have been a few children knocked over.
Absolutely. Well,
statute of limitations has expired.
Well, and which is the perfect segue to talk about raising children. No, I want to talk. You are have had a remarkable career. You've been a wartime correspondent in the Middle East. You are now an anchor at News Nation. But you are here because you've just written a book, and this book comes out next week.
Out next week, and I will not be offended if you pull out your phones on Amazon right now, pre-order, go to Amazon, Born Lucky book. You can pre-order, I won't be offended.
Why are you writing a book now?
Well, you could be mistaken to believe that we had this amazing timing and knew that RFK was going to be making all these announcements and the Trump administration was going to be so much about autism right now, and that's why we chose this date. It had absolutely nothing to do with it. This is the story of me growing up with autism. My father decided back in the mid-1980s when I was diagnosed to adapt me to the world rather than try to adapt the world to me. So these are the lessons for the parent of any kid, grandparent, uncle, aunt, friend, any kid who is struggling with autism, ADHD, anxiety, bullying. It gives you hope. And that's what really this was about. And I think in a time when there is this reckoning on parenting and on victimhood in America, this gives you a very different path.
How does a kid growing up born in the 80s with autism, how do you then become a journalist where your main job are things that are maybe some of the hardest things for someone with autism to do? How did that happen?
It's a great question. We're all born with something. Hair had a lot to do with it. But that was the one thing I had going for me. Look, when I was diagnosed with what we now know to be autism, they really didn't know what to do. The person who diagnosed me in a little psychology building waiting room that we've all been in, for one reason or another, said to my parents, we really don't understand what is going on inside his head. My dad realized that if I were going to have a hope at a normal life, and he will tell you he didn't have any expectations, but it had to be teaching me how to interact with people as a learned skill. So I was sort of repellent to people. Matt is magnetic. He attracts friends and people. When I was a little boy, I was repellent like a magnet. So in 5th grade, for example, the PE coach finally started putting me with the girls because I got bullied so badly with the boys. And Dad's whole idea was if I can teach him how to interact, that he can begin to be different. And I think that's a big part of this is right now there's this idea with every kid, okay, we're just gonna meet you where you're at. Put every kid in bubble wrap, make life as easy as we can for them. With my dad, it was no. There's a reason people don't like hanging out with you. There's a reason why kids bully you, and I'm going to help you with that.
So what were some of the things that he did to help you? Because to your point, in the 80s and 90s, there was so much less information that we now have today on autism. And as I understand it, I have friends who have young children with autism, and one of the things they will say is if you start to tackle it at a young age, you can really change their life.
Yes.
What's fascinating to me, and I've read the book. I think what's so powerful to me is you're telling the story of how your father navigated this without any of the information a parent would have today. So what were some of the things your father did when you were growing up to help you navigate this and teach you?
Number one, he quit his job and became a full-time parent, coach, teacher, therapist, all of these things. Number two, he acknowledged, I think, that I was going to have a really hard time, but it was a lot better to hold my hand through the adversity than it was to just pave a path, right? So in 7th grade, when the principal said to my father and mother in the second week of school at a new school, most of the people in this school think Lucky, which is my nickname, is really weird, and frankly, I do too. Imagine being a parent and hearing that about your child. He didn't say, oh, well, he has autism. That explains everything. They just took it, understood it, and what the message back to me was is, okay, how are you going to adapt to get along and to sort of learn the social skills that come so easily to others? One of the things my dad did was he became my best friend and my only friend back then. But the second thing was, quick example, if we were going to go out to lunch, right, and I spent a lot of time with him because nobody had no play dates or anything, going out to lunch with my dad and one of his friends, and I would incessantly pepper anybody and everybody I could with questions. Normally, a parent would look over at the kid and be like, okay, enough, which is embarrassing to the kid, but also sort of doesn't really help the child at all. What my dad would do is he would tap his watch, which is probably what Matt wants to do right now, so I stopped talking, which is what I would do. And it was my message to A, stop talking, which I will do shortly, and B, it was the message to bookmark that, because then later when we were driving home, he would be like, okay, so when Matt was talking about what he was going to do next week and you wanted to understand how he got the idea to start Concordia, why did you think it was important to interrupt him? And that began the discussion and the learned skill of social behavior.
So take us then to high school, to college. As you started to get older, as you started to benefit from the real focus that your father had with you at this time, how did you start to evolve? How did that happen?
Still evolving. The message from my father was the skills that make you unpopular, bullied, beat up in middle school and high school, those character traits, are what's going to make you popular and successful later in life, which was an important message for kids to hear. It also meant that middle school was by far the best training you could ever get for a Washington newsroom. Trust me. And I think it was twofold. One, it was trying to just get me to survive until I got to college. And by survive, I mean the principal at my high school when I graduated said to my father, on graduation day, we have had kids who have had it harder than Lucky, but nobody who survived and had it harder. So survival was that part. And then it was how to teach me to interact with people. And as I got older, adults became, adults were more understanding of my peculiarities as I grew up.
Where does the nickname Lucky come from?
So Lucky comes from the doctor who delivered me, because I was lucky to be alive when I was born. And up until I was 18, I introduced myself as Lucky Vittert. And my mother, when she was 35, was in her first pregnancy. 1982, very in vogue to have a natural birth. Also, there were no sophisticated ultrasounds. They could tell I was upside down. And so the doctor told my mother, I have a bad feeling, I think you should have a C-section. My mom walks out of the medical building. My dad was sort of absent in that sense. He, 35, was building his businesses, didn't have much interest in having a child. Mom walks out of the appointment, says to my dad, the doctor wants me to have a C-section. My dad goes, I don't know, whatever. And my mom says, well, I know there's all this literature that doctors are prescribing C-sections when they're not really that necessary, but if I'm not going to take my doctor's advice, I should get a new doctor, not take his advice, which ended up saving my life in the Middle East more than a couple of times. I've listened to the people who are there to take care of you. But when I was born via C-section, my mom and dad are in the delivery room and the doctor gasps, oh my God, this is a lucky baby. What you couldn't see on the ultrasound was the umbilical cord was tied around my neck and in a knot twice. So had I been born naturally, I would have died. And the doctor then, on the little whiteboard outside the hospital room, scratched out Leland Vittert a day after I'd been delivered and wrote Lucky. And so that's my nickname.
So you graduate from college and you want to pursue a career in journalism.
Crazy, but yes.
And what were those early days as a reporter like? Did you start as a local reporter in Denver?
I started as a local reporter, my first job in both summers between college. One was in Fayetteville, Arkansas, one was in Madison, Wisconsin, Little Rock, Arkansas, Orlando, Florida, and then Denver, where you and I met.
And so take us through that story. I mean, how did you go again? I want to understand how you were able to be so successful as a reporter. Your job is to explain things with a timer in as best a way as possible. How did you learn to do that?
A couple of things, and I think this is what is one of the takeaways from the book. My dad wrote the afterword to it. George Will wrote the foreword, which meant I had high expectations for 240 pages in the middle. But my dad said that there were no expectations that he had of me growing up. The ... to this, there were two sets of expectations. One was about character, and one was about hard work. The first time he caught me lying, he made me write 1,000 times, "I will never tell a lie." He still has the piece of paper. Number two, starting when I was 5 years old, I was doing push-ups, 200 push-ups a day, 5 days a week. And if you did it, you got a reward, you went to Disney World. So as a young reporter, what I realized is that in a local newsroom, you can kind of outwork anybody just because of the nature of local newsrooms. And that was the first time really that I began to see my dad's lessons pay off, that if you worked hard, you got better stories. If you were in there early, you did more. And that began to pay off.
I want to talk a little bit for a minute about the state of journalism today. You were a correspondent in the Middle East for Fox News, then you were in the Washington Bureau. Now you're at News Nation.
Correct.
For those of us in the room that don't know too much about News Nation, what is it and why are you there versus still at Fox News?
Well, a little bit like private school, I was invited to leave Fox News after the 2020 election. I was the first anchor to publicly question Trump's claims that he won the election. And we now see the emails, and some of them are in the book, that basically said, time for Leland to move on, which probably the best thing that ever happened to me, or one of them. But look, I'll give it to you just in the context of what is happening in cable news right now at 9 p.m., which is the hour I anchor for News Nation. At 9 p.m., I know that Sean Hannity is going to have an opening monologue in which he says Donald Trump is doing 4D chess every night. And then he's going to have a guest who says, no, you don't understand. It's actually 5D chess. That's Sean Hannity. Caitlin Collins is going to raise an eyebrow and ask some snarky question. And Jen Psaki on MSNBC is going to come on and say, tomorrow is Kristallnacht, the Nazis are coming, this is finally happening. And then she's going to have a guest who comes on and says, no, it might actually happen before midnight tonight, we need to beware. So all that we have to do at News Nation is be different. And from your all's perspective, right, Fox is on the right, MSNBC and CNN are here. The middle has been underserved, and the middle is believed for so long in American TV that the middle doesn't care. Somehow being the centrist means you're apathetic. You're more interested in gardening and your kids' soccer games. And what we've found, and why we beat CNN and MSNBC on Sunday in our coverage of Charlie Kirk's funeral.
Which is very recent, right? I mean, in terms of you beating a long-standing legacy cable channel.
But the reason is because we're finding that the center is incredibly passionate right now about being in the center. Specifically, for example, to the issue of autism that is now in the news right now. Two things can be true at once, right? Number one, the President of the United States giving medical advice from the podium may not particularly be all that helpful. But perhaps more importantly, the fact that we're now finally being honest about searching for the cause of autism that's gone from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 36, triple that for boys, and talking about that search is a really good thing. So I think what makes News Nation different is that we can hold competing thoughts in our head at the same time.
So, okay, let's pivot back to talking about autism, because what I want to understand is, as you alluded to, a lot is being talked about right now, the awareness of the subject, and some of that is due to many of the things Secretary Kennedy has raised, which has caused a lot of division among people and among the public. So as someone who has autism,
Yes.
who has just written a book about your experience with autism, and is an anchor at a channel very much intended to master the center. What are we dealing with today in the United States when it comes to autism?
I think it's pretty stunning and telling that you had a lot of people on TikTok after the announcement about Tylenol. You had pregnant women dancing around taking Tylenol, saying, I believe in science, so I take Tylenol, as if they were going to somehow prove something by taking medicine that they didn't need at that moment. And that sort of, to me, is where the political conversation is. And again, in the past 40 years, you no longer die of AIDS. It's not a death sentence. Many cancers we've either figured out how to prevent or certainly therapies to deal with it. Diabetes is no longer an incurable situation. You can manage it. We can build bionic people with multiple artificial joints. I can go through the list of medical advances. We know very, very little more about the causes of autism that's now affecting 1 in 36, so 1 in every 12 families, probably higher right now, than we did when I was diagnosed. We know no more about what it does to people. We don't know much more about the cause. Or, for example, I just got married. No doctor can tell me how, because we know it's genetic, what can my wife and I do to hope that we don't have an autistic child? And I think part of this is the autism community itself says, we need to celebrate everyone. We need to celebrate neurodiversity as if, it's somehow no different than having blue eyes or brown hair or whatever. Hogwash. This is a condition, I grew up with it, it was hell. If I could check a box right now, my child will have autism or not, who would not check no? Anybody? Right. Why are we not spending more time and more effort, and why should the fight to find this cause not be something we care about?
What did your father think when you told him you were going to write a book about this?
So if you all read Born Lucky, I hope that you do. Thank you.
And I will say, it's a terrific book.
Thank you. Pre-order now. Winston Churchill said that politics is the second oldest profession, and it closely resembles the first. True. Think about it for a second. Selling books is the third oldest profession, and it closely resembles the first and second oldest. My father's the most private person in the world. He hates being called a hero in this, which when you read the book, you will realize he really is, as is my mother. I'd say more of a saint than a hero. But terribly uncomfortable with it and willing to have his story told because he thinks it's going to provide hope for so many parents and so many families that have kids who are struggling, again, not just with autism, but with ADHD, with anxiety, with bullying, all these issues. This provides real hope. And so many of the experts, when kids are diagnosed, say there is no reason for hope, things are hopeless, and so many parents feel helpless. And exactly what you said, Matt, that's just not true.
Well, Leland Vittert, thank you very, very much for sharing your story, for giving us a bit of a preview of Born Lucky, and congratulations on putting this book together. I hope it has the kind of effect on its readers that you have had on this room today, so thank you.
Thank you. And Matt, considering that I knew him in 2008, what an incredible testament to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
That was good. Thank you. That was great.